I think it's time for a new series. Great Women from the Past, Episode 1, featuring Judit Polgar. Good woman to start with, 2,700 plus Super GM. On her best, she could defeat anybody. On her worst days, she could still defeat anybody. She's a magician, a very tactical player. We're going to be looking at a Grand Prix where she played at 98 accuracy and took down Lanier Dominguez. Again, one of the other best chess players, except he's a dude. She's a woman. We got A, we got B. There's no C, no such thing. Don't let them tell you that. It doesn't exist. Let's get into it now that the cool people stayed. Pawn to e4. All right. What are we going to get? We're going to get a Grand Prix. As discussed in yesterday's video, you could take down the best with this beautiful system that's very easy to learn. Pawn to f4. So keep in mind, Lanier played pawn to d6. If you do not get knight c6, it's harder to play the bishop b5 that we discussed because, for example, let's say they go g6 and you go bishop to b5 check. Okay, it's okay. But the problem is they're going to go bishop d7 and they're going to take with the queen and their knight still goes to c6, right? The whole point of bishop to b5 is to remove this queenside knight so that your queen gets tied down to c2, right? Because it wants to rotate over to the dark squares. If the knight's still on the board, there's no such rotation. So what do you do if they play pawn g6? I don't know what you do, but what I do is I park my bishop on e2 like so. And then just to show you the idea, many people don't like playing it because, you know, the bishop's on e2 behind the pawn chain. But the point is when black plays the move knight to d4, you have bishop to d1. Isn't that beautiful? You guard c2. Later on, if they're not careful with this diagonal, you can poke and prod and cover the e6 square with the bishop on b3. And other than that, this bishop's just chilling. And the second they take, then it's a beautiful piece again. And you have everything you wanted. You have the rook lifts, you have the pawn breaks in the center. So the bishop parked on d1 is a very nice piece. Don't view it as passive. It's flexible. There's a difference. So what do we get instead? What do we get instead? Well, we get knight to c6. So she's like, okay, bishop to b5 pinning. If he were to go a6, with these doubled pawns, when black doesn't have a b pawn, in the middle game, it's very nice to play with the knight on a4 because nothing can kick it out. And then the knight on a4 stops this d pawn from moving and always aims at c5. It's a tank. It's like Judit Polgar. It's just one of the greatest ever. And it's on the flank, so you wouldn't expect it. So now that we got all of that out of the way, let's get back to the game. Bishop to b5. I'm hyped for this series. We're going to get like Hugh Yifan, Vaishali Ramesh Babu, maybe Irina Krush, Judit Polgar. Who else? Pia Kramling. All these chess geniuses. Not these chess influencers. I don't know why the magnifying glass is like put on them. Maybe because they're like slightly above average on the outside. But, you know, don't get tricked. That's like lustful thinking. You gotta see what's on the inside. And it's not great chess. Much of the time, it's not a great personality either. These people deserve the spotlight. These were geniuses. Right? It's like the only reason their marketing work is because most chess dudes have never spoken to a woman in their life. So they're just odd. Honestly, just strange. Just don't be that guy. So we get bishop d7, cutting the pin, pawn d3, pawn a6, takes, right? She waited to take until we got pawn a6. Now that she removed the knight, you can successfully untie your queen from c2. That's the point. And see, relatively equal, but it's complex relatively equal. That means the better player would win, usually, unless you got a bad night's sleep and you make a blunder. It happens. But an equal fight is all you should want, especially against such an opening like the Sicilian. Queen to d7 does not deter a4. a4 is to deter b5, but it does not exactly deter b5 because the bishop is here. You don't have the doubled pawns, you have the bishop. Now we get pawn to e5, striking in the center. She is a tactician. She likes blowing open the board. Her argument is your king is lagging behind in development. Now, why this is not the greatest move is because envision the knight coming to f6. Then e5 would be a great move. And if the knight comes to h6, you might not want to play e5 because you give them f5. So that's kind of the argument of e5 being rushed. So he goes to h6 getting f5, but okay, e5 still applies pressure. She takes, the pawn is pinned. What he should do right now is take over here. Right, it's very complex. He should take over here, go b4, kicking the knight. Not too human if you ask me. Not too human at all, right? Castles, d takes e7. Why is black slightly better? It's a great question. Only the engine knows. So he played whatever human would play. Queen takes. And keep in mind, she was a tactician. So what do you play as white in this position? Knight takes b5. A deflection tactic. If the bishop takes the knight, you take the rook with check. Good stuff. And you cannot take the rook on a1 because the knight aims at the queen on d6. So we got queen b8. Nice spot for the queen. But then she takes. Is he like, oh, I'm going to take and make a battery? No, because he's a 2700 as well. He's not going to get forked in one move in the middle game, unless he was under time pressure or something. So he takes with the bishop. Retreating bishop move. Okay. Kind of reminds me of the World Championship when Ding put his bishop in the corner for some odd reason and lost the game in one move. This is not that. c4, solidifying the knight on b5. It's a very good knight. Yes, black has the bishop pair, but, you know, you have a pawn and your name's Judit Polgar. You can handle that. That's enough compensation in and of itself for the bishop pair. We got bishop e3. She's like, take my other bishop. I don't need it. I don't want it. Point is, if knight takes bishop, queen takes, say like bishop takes, knight, rook takes, you take. Calm endgame for white. Pass pawn, up a pawn, good knight. Rook lifted. No back rank issues. Never have to deal with bishop to d4 when you get rid of c5. She's like, I'll convert this. And I believe her. I think she would have. He believed her too. So he went bishop c6. Aiming at the bishop. Aiming at the knight, that is. She takes a pawn. He takes. What did he miss? He wanted her to take back. Because if she were to take back, look, everything all of a sudden is under fire. There'll be equal material. And then white's pawn structure would not survive a bad storm. So instead what she did is queen to b4. Pinning the bishop to the queen, a switch. He castles. Activity. Do you take back with the queen or the pawn? You could take back with either, but she takes back with the pawn so that her queen guards f4. Did you notice f4 hanging? X-ray. Queen on the 4th. And then she's like, okay, my pawn structure is not great, but this pawn is going to get through. Why is there a net in my face? Get out of here. Get out of here. So we got pawn takes, rook to d8, and pawn to b6. Point is, she's like, okay, just take. She's all about activity. She understands the name of the game. This pawn is just getting through. He understood that too and went h6. There's not much to do. But he gives his king a loft. He uses the loft. And she improves her queen. Now the pawn can get to b7. You're threatening this, though you might not want to take it. Things are good. He takes a pawn, but she wanted to lose this pawn. Why? Because they were doubled. And now when the rook goes to b1, it's guarding the passed pawn. So that pawn is probably going to get through. We get bishop to f6, guarding e7. And knight jumps into the center of the board. That's a beast of a knight. It aims at f7. It aims at c6. It's a good knight. It's a good knight. So we get knight to d6, a backwards move. And she's like, I could take that. I'm very good at calculating. I understand that this is one. My pawn is on b7. Who's going to stop it? This queen is tied down because the pawn's one away from promoting and the rook's behind it. He's like, well, I could give a check. She's like, that's true, but I'm just going to put my king towards the center. There's no mate. He's like, well, I'm going to trade rooks and maybe I'm going to win your pawn. She's like, maybe, but probably not. Knight to d7. Keep in mind, this queen is guarding the pawn, and now this knight is guarding the promotion square of that pawn. Does black have a perpetual? No. He has a few checks. He pokes and prods. She's like, okay, I'll just go another way, and now there's no more checks. And he cannot stop this pawn. He throws in another couple of moves. Bishop to d4. She promotes. He declines, giving a check with this battery. Where do you go with the king? Not to g4. That would be tragic due to the move pawn to f5, a fork in one. So she plays king h3, and he resigns. 36 moves, 98 accuracy, one of the best to ever play chess. Who do you guys want next in the series? Thank you guys as always for watching. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.